at times don't bring books. Their books are online. And so forth. So it depends. There's all kinds of different issues associated with the resources, but it's about finding what's right for that curriculum. And, you know, and it should keep in mind that this should be predicated on a continuum of learning. We shouldn't just buy something in isolation, like this is a 4th grade or a 6th grade.
Well, that's what I mean. You
text.
look at the whole, you know, you're going to write, you know, hopefully write a K-12 math, let's say.
Yeah.
And then are you going to, instead of just saying we need to replace the books in Algebra 1, are you going to say, okay, we need to do everything?
Certainly, if you look at the resources for algebra, they have to build off of progression from the preceding grades and moving forward, no doubt. But, you know, when you talk about text complexity and resources, there has to be a qualitative analysis done, and there needs to be a quantitative analysis associated with it. You know, right now, and I've asked many people around the district about, so what was the exact adoption policy that you've used? And people look at me and get 2 heads. I get answers all from, well, I used the book in college, so I thought it was a good book, and we purchased it. Well, it's a college book.
Right.
And so, you know, what's to say what is most appropriate for high school? There needs to be a criteria established.
You know, the other piece I'd like to add is that when you talk about resources, I think it's impossible to separate out the resource of time. So you hear Steve talking about, you know, looking at this analysis and that analysis. But unless we have more time for teachers to do what they need to do, then you could take all the planning time and still wouldn't be enough. And I urge this subcommittee to take a look at the district calendar. And I know that's going to raise some eyebrows, but there are districts that give teachers a half day, or not a half day, but they'll give them an early, a later route for students once every week. So every Wednesday, every whatever day, from 7:30 to 9:30, teachers are working in teams, doing the work they need to do. I know this has been discussed before, but we can't let buses or vacations or any other element impede the use of that structure to get done what needs to get done.
I'm not going to disagree with you there either. I mean, but I think that's something, as a board, we need to look at these things. Right now, what I'm looking at is, we can go back to the entire book. That's a decision they have to make. And I'm not disagreeing with what work with that kind of system. I know how it works.
I think it's time to curriculum. I begin with here, because it's so much, we can't talk about this work without talking about the structures.
Well, we just discussed the calendar in the last month, and that request was not brought to us.
I'll be very honest with you, it was not shared with faculty or the process at all. So I think with the process.
So my point is, if you bring that up a month ago, we could address that. We can't address it now, a month too late.
I guess what I'm saying is that an opportunity for each school to have a voice in whatever calendar we are using in our schools need to be made available to your teachers and your administrators. And there's not.
I don't think anybody would argue with that point, but you're 30 days too late for that right now.
If I can, I should point out, and also to the audience, that the legislature passed a law last year. This year, we're supposed to, we can use the RESC suggested calendar as a guide. But starting in 1560, we have to use a common calendar. Common beginning date, common ending date. Certain PDs are going to be set, not by the East Haddam Board of Education, but by LEARN. And that does put some parameters on what we can and cannot do. I do think that's something we should take under advisement to see when we develop the calendar if we can put that kind of thing in. Because now that you don't have to do mandated 4-hour days, but you just need to realize that the state slowly begins to squeeze in on some of the prerogatives that districts used to have relative to this and putting in the requisite number of hours that are required. But I do think it is important to look at time available, not just during the school day, but also PD and also the summer work as a vehicle, and lay out a plan that everybody can see as to how we're going to get these things accomplished. I mean, I think that's the critical element. But we can't have these things that far out of date. We looked at our textbook inventory, and as we had the presentation done by the math chair, I mean, but frankly, the amount of money it would cost us to try to replace the textbooks in just in terms of age, I don't think it would get past the town. I really don't.
Mary Beth, can we revisit the calendar? Is there a time? Because if everybody think if that, it certainly sounds reasonable to me. I don't know if it sounds reasonable to everybody else, but if we have time to revisit the calendar and collaboratively we think that that is something we should talk about, then let's revisit it. But I don't know if we locked in because we voted or.
That I know that there is board policy that dictates when the calendar is adopted, and if it's adopted, we certainly look to see if there's any flexibility.
So we adopted it, maybe we can revise it.
Yeah. Because it certainly sounds reasonable. I mean, all these deadlines and stuff.
I mean, that's what's led us to these issues.
Right.
There's not enough time for people to
Yep.
do everything the state has asked educators to do. And I'm not,
No, I understand.
So are we pretty well set then? We're gonna be looking at trying to do language arts and mathematics, see if we can get a curriculum done within the next 13 months to maybe go to the board next April or May at the latest, and put in, into the next budget, a line item for curriculum implementation, so we know what we need for books, materials, and so on, or some approximation.
Yeah, I'd like to, make sure that also, while math and language arts are certainly key areas, curriculum can be developed across all curricular contexts to a degree. And certainly in the way that it's structured now, math and language arts directly relate to other disciplines. So where the monies and so forth have to be strategically, placed and so forth. Much can be done in terms of an understanding about how curricular structures work and also implementing things in other areas along the way.
But I think what I'm trying to get at is, I would like to introduce the concept to the community, to the fiscal authorities in town, and to the community at large, that on an annual basis, there will be in the budget a line item strictly for curriculum implementation. We dedicate it aside. We don't have it here, there, and everywhere. And that the Board of Finance, and the voters, when they go, know that we have put in dedicated monies that will simply be used for that.
Yeah, there used to be one in the budget, and he's had them as well. But it's one of those things where we're at a spot now, that's when a cycle, at least, obviously I wasn't here, but it presumably existed. And right now, we're at ground zero with pretty much everywhere. That puts us in a tough spot.
And as I said, we've got to start somewhere.
That's right.
And that's why I'm suggesting we start with math and English, because we know math is an issue. Everybody's discussed that. If English is close to it, or language arts is close to it, it's a good place to begin. The next step would be to say, okay, going out from there, what are the next ones we've got to take on? Let's get a cycle going so that we can inform the staff, the community. Here's the plan. That's how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to process, and that we're going to get this idea of a curriculum implementation line in the budget, a separate line district-wide, and that's all it is. Textbooks, materials, etc. And it's separate and distinct from where these other things are included within individual budgets, so that if there's a textbook line in the high school, that may be to fill in, but the implementation is down here. I mean, I think we really need to get that to the community and start to get the idea that it's not cheap, but it's got to be put in there and put up front that we're just in that kind of a box right now. Anybody? Does that sound good?
Right,
Yes,
oh, yeah.
And I would just turn it over to the superintendent to work out the details, to use the time that's available during the school day, to look at PD days, to set up a calendar for the summer, because clearly there's going to need to be work done in the summer. There's no way you're going to get around that. And going out into 14, 15 with the expected date, as I said, 13, 14 months, and get it done with a line in the budget for that. Okay? Anybody have a terrible disagreement? I think the next thing would be to simply plan the review and revision going out. And I think that requires knowing, you know better than I do, where these different ones are, and what are the ones that are most pressing. You may be 2 a year, you might be able to do 3, I don't know.
Likely.
Yeah. But if we could get a plan, if you could look at that, taking out math and language arts English, and get a plan and say, okay, in 16, 17, good Lord, this is what we can look at, 17, 18. I mean, give people some idea where we're going, give the community that, start to get people used to the fact that they're going to see it in the budget, that these things are going to be coming forward, that the board will be getting these for their approval, that will be approving textbooks, and go from there. Sound reasonable?
The TV calendar that you have, you have January and February, and I think some of the first Sundays are all that. Has it been utilized? Yeah.
Any other items? It's not a whole.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah, just want to check with the members first.
She just asked me a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just was going to say, is anybody? If not, we'll go out here and give you opportunities,
I was
folks.
just going to say that some districts now currently, on the second half of the school year, are using hired subs to cover teams, to let teachers continue curriculum writing now, because they're in the crunch as well. But one area is technology in the 21st century across the district, and specifically elementary schools, and not just textbooks.
Oh,
Technology.
well, we talk about resources, it's certainly,
Exactly.
textbooks is
Exactly, and I
just,
think they're hearing textbooks,
Yeah.
but resources across the district, but particularly elementary
Right,
schools.
I'm not, when I say implementation, I'm saying whatever you need to put a curriculum in, textbooks,
Right.
other
Absolutely.
materials, including
Absolutely.
technology, all have to be included in that, absolutely.
we
But
do use
particularly at
subs.
the elementary school. Looking at a schedule now to really implement and getting the teams together at all of the district, all of the schools in the
And I think that's one of the things I'm asking the superintendent to look at, to see how she can do this and plan this out, working with a team, working with the faculty. Since I ran out of agenda, I will open it up to folks sitting out there. A lot of you came. I'll be happy to entertain your comments. If I can, just kind of the protocol of the Board of Education is to identify yourself and go from there. Yes, ma'am.
Mary Beth Mordecai. So I think that, as we all know, curriculum is an ongoing thing, that it should be updated all the time. And unfortunately, it did go by the wayside in the last couple of years. But I think that the message to the public, just in my opinion, shouldn't be we're starting with math and English, because that kind of belittles some of the other subjects that really need updating in their curriculum too. So maybe the message should just be more pointed that we're going to maybe do the resources, the books or something to math and English. But I really think that all of the subjects should be started to be worked on where that it's not been addressed in a few years as a formal curriculum writing. I'm sure that all the teachers have been looking at their curriculum all along and probably updating it. So if you did the subject levels and had them all update their curriculum or start their curriculum writing together, I'm sure that a lot of it has been done over the years. But I don't think that the message that we're going to just concentrate on math and English is a good one for someone who is concentrating on foreign language or something like that, because it would be a, what about us? I mean, I understand, like, math has been a real problem, and I understand what your point is. I'm just not sure that might not be a little bit of a wrong message, that you're sounding like you're leaving some of the other stuff out until we can get to it.
If I can, I know normally it's like we don't respond. So pretend you didn't hear this, but that was not my intention.
Okay.
What we understand curriculum is an ongoing process. Teachers are doing this all the time. What I'm saying is I want to get these done 100% and then move on the same way. So this work that the teachers are doing now in these other areas will be brought to fruition at some point. They have a target.
Right.
It's not-
So since I'm here, I understand that that's
Right.
what you meant. But someone who just hears we're going to concentrate on math and English might get a little bit of a
I
different...
hope in the minutes maybe we'll make that point, and you folks are here, you understand that it is simply not, everything else stops, and we only do these two. all the work faculty is doing right now will continue, and that will simply be rolled into that target date whenever it comes up. But thank you for that.
I think resource allocation has to be responsive as well. You know, let's face it, we shouldn't just say, well, it's not your year, and
Right,
you
that's-
get
yeah.
nothing. And so the bottom line is, there will be some groups, just by virtue